the World Economic Forum is fundamentally about the reduction of the global population. I mean, the World Economic Forum's slogan is to bring about a betterment of the world. Notice they don't say for humanity or for people. I don't think they actually care about people. It's all about the planet. I am moving secretly among them. They don't know who I am, and they're often quite open in talking about themselves. They just assume I'm a WEFer like them. I'm almost never stopped. I just walk right in like I'm meant to be there, and no one stops me. The World Economic Forum is a gathering of power brokers from around the world, all globalists. It's kind of the working out of a godless agenda. Imagine how arrogant you got to be to think that it's your job to save the planet, to think that you've been appointed by no one other than yourself to determine how everyone else on the planet lives. I hate what these people represent. I hate the WEF. I want to destroy. Welcome to another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. And as you can see, today, I'm not in the studio. I am traveling around the world, and at present, I'm in Mexico City. I'm here only briefly, just here for a couple of meetings. You'll know that those of you who are members of the posse or regular viewers of this podcast, listeners will know that I have been tracking migrants making their way to the United States to become illegal aliens. And of course, there are illegal aliens in every country that they pass through, except for their country of origin. And I've been fascinated to see the effect of Trump being elected president on these groups. And what I've noticed is that they are much, much smaller. But that's not the topic for today's Ideas Have Consequences. In fact, today we're talking about the WEF, the World Economic Forum. Now, last week I laid out the ideological origins of the World Economic Forum because we call these people idiots, because they bought into idiotic, inhumane ideas, anti-human ideas. And I was laying that out in the previous episode. And this episode, I'm going to talk more practically about the World Economic Forum and about how I go about attacking the World Economic Forum. That is to say, when I go there. So tonight, I will board a flight here in Mexico City for Switzerland. I want to get there just a couple of days early. The older I get, I find that the jet lag affects me quite severely. And we're talking about a 7-hour time difference. So by me getting there a couple of days early, it allows me to start adjusting just a bit to the schedule. And then on Monday, January 20th, the World Economic Forum begins. So by the time this airs, I will already be at the World Economic Forum. And by the way, you can catch me doing a variety of interviews about the WEF. I'll be doing, Steve Bannon, Steve Deese, or Deese rather, I should say. It looks like Deese, Steve, but okay, Deese, whatever. Dr. Drew, what else? I'll be doing Washington Watch with Tony Perkins. Anyway, fact is, I'll just be doing a bunch of different podcasts, a bunch of different shows. Eric Metaxas, a variety of them where I will be reporting live from there. But those will be briefer, for instance, I think Dr. Drew is a long one. That'll be a 40-minute interview, but the other ones will be, be pretty quick hits. And so if you want the real scoop, the full scoop, you'll come here to my channel on YouTube, on Rumble, elsewhere, on Twitter, on X, where you will find me making commentary on what's going on. Now, what I've done is compiled a variety of questions that people are asking me on several platforms about my participation in the World Economic Forum. And I'm going to try answering those, and in so doing, hopefully giving you real insight into not just the WEF and how it works, but also how it is that I'm able to do what I do. Now, again, this isn't my first time to go to the World Economic Forum. You need to be very clear on that. This will be my third year in a row that I have attended. And so I'm a veteran. I know what's going on. I know how to go about doing what it is that I do. And I'm going to explain some of that to you to kind of give you a little bit of a behind-the-scenes glimpse of how all this works. Now, the very first question that someone asked me is, what is the WEF? Well, to understand that, you need to go and look at previous episodes that I have done on Ideas Have Consequences, where I'm explaining exactly that. And I've done several on it from a variety of perspectives. I have done one or two on Klaus Schwab. I've done it on their population agenda. The previous episode of Ideas Have Consequences, I laid out using the chalkboard. I laid out the various documents, books that have been very influential in not only founding the World Economic Forum, but in channeling their thinking and what that's all about. So I would encourage you to go and look at those episodes, because those go into great depth and detail explaining it. You'll also find a four-part series that I wrote for Daily Wire called The Great Jet Set. It's not the Great Reset, it's the Great Jet Set. That's who these people are. You'd also find that if you don't have a membership to Daily Wire, it's behind a paywall. You can, I wrote it, and I can't get into it because it's behind a paywall. But it's okay, because you'll find it on my website at LarryAlexTaunton.com. So you'll find it there. So if you really want to know what the World Economic Forum is, you'll find that there. But in short, the sound of the World Economic Forum, that name kind of gives, and perhaps intentionally, this sense that it's a bunch of economists who get together and talk about boring things. I recall a joke where a man is told by his physician, that he's dying, and he says, "Is there anything that I can do?" And the doctor says, "Yes, marry an economist and move to Idaho." And he says, "Well, will it make me live longer?" And he says, "No, but it'll feel like forever." It sounds boring. That's what the World Economic Forum, the name, would suggest. And I think it's meant to. It's meant to sort of lull you into thinking that this is just a conference of a bunch of economists who are talking data and statistics and a bunch of boring things. That is not what the World Economic Forum is. It is a gathering of power brokers from around the world, all globalists. Or let's put it this way, the World Economic Forum itself has a globalist agenda. Not necessarily everyone who attends is a globalist. Musk has attended. Trump has attended. He was invited to come and speak. Javier Milei was invited to speak. Those guys are not globalists. They saw it as an opportunity for a platform to really hammer home what it is that they think and what it is they believe. And as I say, this will be my third year in a row to attend, and I promise you, I am not a globalist. But we'll talk a little bit more detail about what's involved in that. How is it that I get to the WEF? Well, the logistics of the WEF are worth discussing because it tells you a little bit about them and who they are. Davos, where they gather, Davos, Switzerland, it's a ski town, and it's a ski town of the sort that you find, dotting the Alps and to a lesser extent in the Pyrenees throughout Europe. And these ski towns are generally fairly small, fairly moneyed, and their business is quite seasonal. So Davos is not a big town at all, and in fact, it's quite inadequate in size to sponsor something like the World Economic Forum. There's inadequate restaurants and coffee shops, and not enough hotels for the accommodations of attendees. Parking is terrible there. But it seems that's kind of their intention. So rather than holding it, say, in a city in Switzerland, that could, because that's where the World Economic Forum is. The World Economic Forum is, their headquarters is in Geneva. Rather than holding it in Geneva, which would seem to be a sensible place to do it, loads of hotels, loads of parking, loads of infrastructure, and of course, an international airport. So simple. Why not there? Why not Lucerne? Why not in Zurich? Why not in Bern? Well, it seems that part of what they're doing is to create a sense of exclusivity and making it difficult for the people they really don't want to be there to be there. And while it's very difficult for me to get there, to give you, an example, this is January. They hold it in January in Switzerland. Do you know how cold it is in Switzerland in January? Do you know what the roads are like in Switzerland in January? Not good. I mean, this is like saying we're gonna host this massive conference in January in the Yukon Territory. I mean, it's just not a great place, to host this sort of thing. But that, it seems to me, is by design. So for me to get there, I will fly, for instance, this evening from Mexico City to Zurich. And then from Zurich, I will drive to my hotel, and I'll spend a couple of days chilling there and, trying to acclimate to a new time zone. And then I will go to Davos. Now, to go from Zurich to Davos, you got two choices. I mean, unless you own a private jet, which, of course, I don't. If someone would like to donate one, by the way, I would be thrilled. I would love to. If there was anything I would change about my life were I a mega, mega wealthy person, is I would never fly commercial anymore. It is awful. These people don't fly commercial. And frankly, as I've said many times, I don't begrudge them that. If you can fly on a private jet, good for you. I'm thrilled for you that you don't have to go through the drudgery, of going, dealing with TSA types and, everybody searching everything that you have, and then everybody being crowded aboard a tin can that's miserable for hours on end with mediocre food and tiny bathrooms and waiting and your flight cancellations and delays and all the things that go with that. Good for you. But you got a lot of nerve if you do that, and then you go and lecture the rest of us on our carbon footprint. And that's exactly what these people do. So what they do is they fly into Davos in their private jets. And you know what? Such a long drive from one part of Davos to another. They can't be bothered to do that in their big, long Mercedes and BMWs, which is almost exclusively what they drive. And I don't mean the little entry-level BMWs and Mercedes, and not even the electric ones. These are the big, gas-guzzling, beautiful, fast, powerful BMWs and Mercedes. No, they don't do that. They take helicopters. From the airport into the city, where they then get into their nice big BMWs and their plush Mercedes, where they then go to their hotels. Again, don't begrudge them that. Don't begrudge you that. If you can do that, that's wonderful. Good for you. But don't lecture us on our carbon footprint. Don't tell us that the rest of us shouldn't be driving internal combustion engines. Don't tell the rest of us that we need to live in smart cities and drive little tiny smart cars, and that we need to be riding our bicycles, and lecturing us because we're eating beef and not bugs. This is the way these people think. So for them, getting to Davos is quite simple. For me, just going from Zurich, you're talking about maybe an hour and a half on snowy roads, so they can be quite dangerous. Or you can take a train, but it's not direct because Davos is not a big town. So you're going to have, I think, 2 changes on the train in order to get there. So the point being is you're going to spend a lot of time in transit getting there. Now, I want to show you here as a little video, just something I recorded on my phone when back in, I don't know, maybe September or so, I was looking at accommodations in or near Davos. Now, look at this video here. Now, I'm just scrolling as slowly as I can so that you can see the prices here. These are real prices. This is on booking.com, I think. And you're thinking to yourself, these prices can't be real. No, they are real. And again, it's because every little town around Davos itself, and then those that are around it, they are either solidly booked or they jack their prices way up. And we're not talking about, you look at a hotel here, that's $20,000, $25,000 for just a few nights, $55,000 for just a few nights. You're thinking, gosh, this must be the kind of place where, I'm reclined and have my head in the lap of a beautiful woman who's feeding me grapes, and another guy is standing by and he's fanning me, and everyone is calling me sire and bowing. No, we're talking like these are like Holiday Inn Expresses. Less than that. They are, days in, sleep in. These are not particularly good places. That just some of them are, but no hotel is worth that kind of money. I don't care how nice it is. It's not worth that kind of money. So how is it that they do that? Well, again, they're either buying up these hotels to prevent people like me from coming, or they're jacking up the prices because they know that loads of people, thousands of people from around the world are trying to come, and some people will pay that. And you're going, who would pay that? Well, a billionaire might pay it because it's not, anything to them. Government officials, bureaucrats will pay it. And that's because it's not their money. They're spending your money. They don't care. Sure, we'll pay $10,000 a night. We'll pay $25,000 a night. We'll pay $50,000 in order to stay here for a few days because not my money. It's easy to spend other people's money and to spend it recklessly and carelessly. But this is what they do. So just getting there, the logistics of getting to Davos is itself very difficult. Now, who does go? Well, I've just mentioned that bureaucrats go, many government officials go, but last year, for example, at the World Economic Forum in January of 2024, you had, you had 50 heads of state who attended, 115 billionaires who attended. You had more than 600 CEOs of major corporations who attended. We're not talking. I'm a CEO. I'm a CEO of Fixed Point Foundation, but we're not talking, petty small organizations like mine. We're talking BlackRock. We're talking Google. We're talking Coca-Cola. We're talking these kinds of major brands who are represented there. I don't know if Coca-Cola is going to be there or not, but my point is that these are the kinds of organizations, the kind of CEOs who are there. And then you have roughly last year about 2,700 other people who attend. Now, for a moment, I just want to talk about those 2,700 other people. You see at the top, you have the real decision makers. At the top where you have the decision makers and the policy wonks and the so-called agenda, WEF, World Economic Forum agenda contributors, those are the people who are they're the ideologues. They're the ones who are driving the agenda. Those are the true believers. The 2,700 other people who attend may or may not be true believers. They may or may not be people who actually really even understand what the World Economic Forum is. They often are people who are very young. A lot of the WEF targets a lot of young people. They're kind of their Hitler youth. They're kind of their, the Soviets had what they called the pioneers. This is kind of the WEF's version of the Boy Scouts, but they're training them. They're inculcating them with their own propaganda, a globalist environmental propaganda, which I find very sad and also extremely dangerous. But the point that I want to drive home is those people down at the bottom, I find when I meet them in Davos, that they tend to be very idealistic. They're people who see this as providing them with some kind of purpose. They see themselves as saving the planet. I mean, the World Economic Forum's slogan is to bring about a betterment of the world. Notice they don't say for humanity or for people. I don't think they actually care about people. It's all about the planet, you see. And there's a real difference in that. I mean, imagine, this is maybe worth a podcast all on its own, but I have thought that it might be interesting to do a podcast about how much difference it would make if world leaders, if politicians were to adjust their thinking and make their mission, their personal mission as representatives of the people to bring about a betterment of life for those people that they represent. It used to be what it meant to be a public servant. That's what it used to mean to be a congressman. That's used to be what it meant to be a president. And at least in the United States, and to some extent, in some other countries. Not all of them by any stretch of the imagination, but if you were elected president of the United States, I mean, it was your job to care for the American people. It was your job to make life easier and better for them. That's not the way globalist politicians, not the way globalist agenda, in general think. They think they really don't. They're fundamentally anti-human, and they think more in terms of doing what they can do, quote unquote, for the planet and to fulfill their own godless agenda. But I sometimes wonder, I mean, what a difference it would make if someone had the attitude that, and to some extent, Trump does have this attitude, but has an attitude that says, you know what? Reagan was like this. I want to get government out of your way. I want to reduce taxes. I want to reduce regulations and things that make life burdensome for you. I want to give you the opportunity to flourish by getting government out of your way. It's not my job to give you stuff, but it is my job to get government out of your way and to find ways to improve life for you through better roads, through better infrastructure, by reducing corruption, reducing taxes, reducing government spending, reducing bureaucracy. This is just simply not the attitude that most politicians have these days, and certainly not the kind of people that go to the World Economic Forum. But the people who are down at the bottom, they tend to be the kind of people that I almost laugh. I feel sorry for them. They're the kind of people that I'm walking around Davos during the WEF, and they do refer to it, by the way, as the WEF, and they refer to themselves as WEFers, which I actually think is kind of funny. I mean, it's like calling yourself a Swiftie. You know, you're a fan of Taylor Swift, and you're a Swiftie. This is the way they talk. They're WEFers. But they're the kind of people that when I'm walking around Davos during the World Economic Forum, they might be wearing they're wearing all the swag. They'll be wearing a hat that says WEF on it, or a hoodie that says WEF on it, or a hat or a shirt that says global citizen, this kind of thing, which is just sheer nonsense and it's naive. But there are also people who don't really understand that the World Economic Forum is fundamentally about the reduction of the global population. Now, I said in the previous episode of Ideas Have Consequences, I explained that in a lot more detail. So if you're interested in that, go and look at the previous episode where I'm using the chalkboard and I explain that in great detail. This is not me making something up, ladies and gentlemen. It's not me trying to be, the posse knows I'm anything but clickbait. I try to provide you with evidence for the claims that I'm making here. And the evidence that I'm providing is theirs. It's the things they're saying. A guy like Bill Gates, who's a member of the World Economic Forum, he's got videos on YouTube talking about reducing the global population. Now, he tries to couch it in very benign terms. In the previous episode, we played a clip for you of Dr. Dennis Meadows, one of the 4 authors of Limits to Growth, talking about it. And he's a World Economic Forum agenda contributor, and I would argue one of the most influential members of the World Economic Forum, saying we need to reduce the global population from 8 billion to less than 2 billion. That's not the stuff that I think the World Economic Forum really wants you to hear. In fact, I suspect there was a phone call made to Meadows after he gave that interview and said that, and say, Dennis, shut the hell up. Don't say that publicly. The public can't handle the truth. But they can't resist telling you what they really think. And it's because they're absolutely full of themselves. But we'll come back to that. So these are the kinds of people that attend. So you could, in theory, if you could afford it, and attending the WEF is extremely expensive. It's anywhere from, say, about $25,000 to $55,000. Last I looked, I haven't looked this year, but somewhere in that range, in order to attend, to get the lanyard and give you access to the breakout sessions and to the plenary sessions, the big full sessions, where, say, somebody like, John Kerry is speaking, or a Bill Gates is speaking, or a Javier Milei, who's not a globalist, and I don't think he's going to be there this year. Individuals like that might be speaking, but then you have the breakout sessions that are all around Davos in smaller venues. And those are the ones that I tend to target, but we'll come back to that. Someone asked me, Larry, why do you go? It's a good question. It's a fair question. Those who are very familiar with my work know that I take very seriously going to the things that I'm talking about. So rather than just sitting and as most people in my profession do, conservative or liberal, it doesn't matter. Conservative, I don't really want to call them liberals anymore. They're not really liberals anymore. Conservative or leftists. Most people in my line of work who are writers or perhaps they're reporters or they're political pundits, commentators, they just stay in New York or DC, Chicago, LA, Atlanta, Paris, London, and they are armchair pundits. They just pontificate from the studio or, get up in the morning and, watch a Morning Joe or CNN or BBC or listen to NPR and read the New York Times, and they sit down and they offer their opinions on what they've read or what they've heard. That's lazy. That's really, really lazy. And I feel that it's very, very important in my work that I'm speaking to you not just simply because I've researched the topic thoroughly, but because I've done the hard work of actually going there, of experiencing it. Way back in the day when I was in the academic world and I was teaching history, philosophy, some literature, I always felt, and I was very young, I always felt it's something of a disadvantage when I was discussing the history of Egypt. So I might be teaching Western civilization, for instance, and almost everything that I would talk about in a course like that, I had seen or experienced in some way. I'd been to Greece and climbed all over the various ancient ruins that one finds there, or in Britain or in France, or maybe I'm discussing Nazi Germany, or those are all things that I could associate real personal experiences with, not because I was there in history, but because rather I had seen the places that I was talking about, and I could bring a personal knowledge to them. At that time, I can now because I've been in Egypt many times, and I'll be there again in a couple of weeks. But at that time, when I was discussing, say, the building of the pyramids, or I'm talking about the Egyptian Museum, or I'm talking about Luxor, or whatever, the Nile, civilization growing along that, the Nile Delta, all of that, it was all just from books. It was all just from things that other people had said and I had read. Didn't mean they weren't true. It just meant that the way I was discussing them lacked the seasoning that is given with personal experience. Your personal experiences infuse the things that you're discussing, and it lends it a certain measure of power and credibility. When it comes to the World Economic Forum, I just feel fraudulent if I'm just sitting and talking about that, and I'm waxing eloquent on it, but I actually never been there, haven't encountered, haven't seen it. So I try to go. So there's no substitute for personal experience. So I try to go every year that I can report to you, that I can tell you from personal experience what's going on there. So that's why I do that. And some people have expressed concern for my personal safety. I appreciate that. I don't feel any concern for my personal safety at the World Economic Forum. There are countries that I go to, and there are countries on this particular trip. I'm going to go to about, 6 or 7 countries on this particular 2-month journey, where I do feel some measure of concern for my own safety. I feel a strong calling to what I do. And calling, by the way, is important. It's one thing to go do something, because you want to do it, or it amuses you. I do what I do because I feel it's my calling. It's my own personal mission. I'm very clear on what my mission is, and I pursue it doggedly. A travel tip for you, it's kind of off topic, but a travel tip for you, there's nothing you can do that more simply and readily to see to your own personal safety when you're traveling, particularly when you're traveling in the third world, and Switzerland is most definitely not the third world, to see to your own personal safety, and that is to be careful about where you stay and how you get from place to place, your transportation. So in other words, protect the spaces that you are in. And so if you choose to go, let's say, to Turkey, or you choose to go to Morocco, or you choose to go to India, you should pay the extra money and stay at excellent, reputable, global reputation type of hotels. And the reason for that is because beyond the fact that the service will be, incredible, they are used to hosting Americans. They're used to hosting Westerners, and they understand a lot of things about you that maybe you wouldn't readily think about. So, for instance, in India, they would know that they can't just feed you a salad that's washed with water from the local sources, because they know that while Indians can drink that water, can consume it, that Americans generally cannot. And that is because we are used to everything being much, much cleaner. And so they will feed you those things that they know are not going to get you sick. And they also will take your personal physical safety very, very seriously. And that is because their reputation, their very business relies upon your personal safety. So they will give you good advice, a hotel with a good concierge. They will offer you a good counsel, good advice about what you do and don't do. And they will also provide you with transportation, people who've been vetted that before they've hired them, rather than you just, hiring a random Uber. For instance, here in Mexico City, I've used your Uber, but generally speaking, if you're a young woman, never use Uber outside of the country. Just as a rule, that's just not something you want to do. I could tell you one horror story after another. You're going to end up somewhere, or for that matter, even just a taxi. Black cabs in the UK and some other places, the local taxis are fine, mostly in what I'll call first world countries. But generally speaking, getting from one place to the next, you want to make sure that you and I recognize you're paying extra. You might pay an extra $200 or $300 a night to stay in a place. You might pay extra you will pay extra for your transportation, but you need to see it as an insurance policy. That's part of your insurance policy, to see to your personal safety. You want to be able to come back to your hotel, know that you can get a clean shower, that you can get a meal that you can tolerate, that your laptop won't have been stolen, that your room will be clean, and you can recover and then head back out. Anyway, I just throw that in for you because I make a point of staying in nice places, and I'm very careful about the drivers I use. And I now have a number of drivers that I trust all over the world in a variety of countries. I got their cell phones and I say, I'm coming. I need you to come and pick me up at the airport. So I've accumulated a lot of people that I trust, translators, other people that I use. So some people are interested in knowing, just the basics of how I go about doing things, not just in Switzerland, but anywhere. And that's part of it. I'm very careful about the people that I associate with. I'm careful about where I stay, and I'm careful about my transportation. But as it pertains to Switzerland, it's not as big a deal. I mean, Switzerland is a very, very safe country, safer than the United States. It's a very wealthy country, and taking a taxi or something is not going to be a problem for you. And you can stay at low end, kind of places, and almost certainly be very safe. Problem is, during the World Economic Forum, there are no low end places. So in my case, I'm going to be commuting 2 hours a day one way. So I will have 4 hours of commuting every day that I go to the World Economic Forum. And that's because everything nearby is insanely expensive. Insanely expensive. I don't mean $1,000 a night. I don't mean $2,000 a night. I mean $6,000 a night. I mean crazy expensive kind of places. So bear that in mind. There's also just little things that I do to try to blend in. Now, you may say, well, Larry, gosh, you shouldn't be putting out a video like this until after you've been there. These people are so arrogant. They only move in their own circles, you see. These globalists, they're in an echo chamber. They don't watch Ideas Have Consequences. If you do, if they do, great. I would love them to watch this and know what scumbags I think they all are, with their globalist agenda and their depopulation agenda and their anti-human agenda. So it's easy for me to blend in. And because people are wearing coats, no one really notices that I don't have a lanyard, because the assumption is that it's under your big heavy coat. Because again, this is in Davos. This is, high in an alpine retreat in Switzerland in January. So it's incredibly cold. People are wearing big coats, me a big leather coat or somebody a big overcoat. So your lanyards are usually hidden. And what's funny is that the World Economic Forum, for its love affair with technology and specifically with artificial intelligence, they're remarkably analog when it comes to the World Economic Forum. Now, we'll see if that changes this year, but it's usually just a young woman standing at the door with a clipboard and, asks for your name, as you come in, and marks you off the list and lets you come straight in. You would think that it would have some kind of, let's say, like wristband, that they scan or something much more technologically savvy to make sure that people like me don't get in. Now, Rebel News, the way they go about doing it, it's just a different strategy. Is they're not endeavoring to be a spy at the World Economic Forum the way I do it. It's not that one strategy is better than the other. They're both very different, and they both provide something unique. I am moving secretly among them. Rebel News, just by way of example, they're there with their film crews and someone, with their mic, and they're harassing these people as they're going into the buildings and following them, when they go out into the parking lot. That's what they're doing. I'm not there for that kind of scoop. Rather, I'm there to get kind of an insider's perspective on the World Economic Forum because, A, they don't know who I am. And again, we'll see if that's the case this year. They don't know who I am, and they're often quite open in talking about themselves. They just assume I'm a WEFer like them. No one's looking for my lanyard. And usually when I walk into these places, and it's hard for me to explain this unless you see me do it. I just walk into these places like I own them. And the people who are standing there at the door, I won't say I've never been stopped, but I've maybe been stopped once. Maybe once. And I just walk straight in like I own it. And these young people at the door, again, usually it's a young woman, if you're doing it with self-confidence and acting like you do belong there, they're usually a little intimidated to question whether you belong there. So I'm almost never stopped. I just walk right in like I'm meant to be there, and no one stops me. And I just keep going. Now, I don't target the plenary sessions. I don't target the major sessions because those would be much, much harder, to get into, which is okay. I target the breakout sessions. So that last year, some of you will know, next thing I know, I'm sitting and I'm chatting with former British Prime Minister Theresa May, and I'm talking with the former Prime Minister, President of Portugal, and I'm talking with Princess Eugenie, the daughter of Prince Andrew. People like this because they're talking to me very openly because they assume I'm a WEFer. I'm not there to offer my opinions. So I'm not seeking to get into in an argument with these people. I just ask them, so tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me why you're here. And the interesting thing, this is a little party trick for you. It's when my wife is Lori. Lori's not shy. She's reserved, and she's not a small talker. Neither am I, but I'm much more outgoing, and I'm not intimidated by a party atmosphere. Lori doesn't like that kind of atmosphere very much. And I told her years ago, if you're running out of things to say, ask people about themselves, and you'll never have to ask another question. You'll never have to talk again. And it's because people love to talk about themselves. We all do. And if you ask them what they do for a living or about their family or whatever, away they'll go. You don't have to worry about it. It's that to the 10th power at the World Economic Forum. And the reason is because the people you don't immediately recognize because they're internationally known, because they're a prime minister or they're a president, or somebody like a Bill Gates or something. Those people can't resist. That is, the ones who aren't internationally known. They can't resist telling you why they're important. So, for instance, last year I'm sitting in a coffee shop and a woman comes over and asks if she can sit in a chair at my table. And I'll tell you about that again in just a moment. And she immediately wants me to know that she is a translator for the president of South Korea. She's very full of her own self-importance. And I just ask her a few questions and boom, away she goes. She wants me to know that she's important. None of these people ever ask me questions. So I'm not put into a position to have to lie. And I'd have no qualms about it, by the way, if I did, because I'm there with a mission and with a purpose. But I don't ever have to do that. If people do ask me, I just tell them I'm a writer, which is 100% true. Or I have another answer, which is a really boring answer, and no one ever follows up with me on this. I just say I'm the head of a nonprofit. You see their eyes glaze over, like, I don't want to ask this guy about that. That sounds nightmarishly boring. I don't want to sit through that. So often if they do ask you a question, they're asking it because they feel obligated to, not because they're actually interested. They want to talk about themselves. So again, to sort of sum up where we are here, I fly to Switzerland. I then make my way to the World Economic Forum by train or by taxi. Depending on the weather, I prefer to get a taxi and there's a driver there that I use every year because I trust him and he understands the circumstances, but the roads aren't always great for this. And also because a taxi driver, if I were to rent a car and go there myself, I wouldn't be able to park. There'd be nowhere for me to park, and I'd be forced to walk from one end of the city to the other. Not that it's a big city, but it's a long walk when you're talking about snow being piled up and it's windy and it's snowing and it's freezing cold. So usually what I do is I have my driver and my taxi driver in his electric Prius. I'll have him drop me somewhere, and then he's allowed to go to the taxi stand. See, so he can go and park in places I can't park. And then I'll ring him up and I'll say, okay, come get me. Swing by, pick me up, take me to the next place. Then he goes to the taxi stand again. And then I call him up and I say, come get me. Let's go over to this part. Let's go down here. Let's go look at this. And so he's always waiting for me. And then afterwards, he takes me to the hotel. But what I do, because I'm not paying that $25,000 or that $55,000 in order to attend. And by the way, it's kind of annoying. There's some people go into the YouTube comments and say, he can't get into the WEF. I go to the WEF, people. I've been there. Don't tell me I can't get in, because I do get in. I have been. So I know what I'm talking about. But let's suppose that this year, that they're finally on to me. And they are going to make it hard for me to get into any of the sessions. That's okay. I don't care. That's not going to prevent me from doing what I do. And that's because, as any of you who have ever attended a conference will know, the real conversations aren't taking place in those big plenary sessions where one person is speaking, or maybe there's a panel of people who are speaking and everyone in the audience is listening. Often what happens at conferences, and again, let's just think of one that's associated with your work. Let's say you're a real estate agent and you go to the National Association of Real Estate Agents in Vegas. You maybe go into a couple of sessions and listen to a little bit, but for the most part, you're probably in a hotel coffee shop, or you're in the lobby, or you're in a restaurant with other agents and other people where you're having meaningful conversation. That's where that stuff is taking place. So even if they could keep me out of all the sessions, and they could make it more technological this year, where the only way you get in is if your lanyard or something that you're carrying is scanned, or they're really going to be rigid and no one gets in that the girls don't check your name off of. That's okay. I'll just go sit in a hotel lobby. I'll go sit in a coffee shop. I'll go sit in a restaurant. And those places are going to be full of WEFers. They're going to be full of some of the people who are doing the presentations. And I'm going to strike up a conversation with some of them, and off you go. And you find yourself hearing people saying things they wouldn't say publicly because they think I'm a WEFer. And they don't know that I'm actually a spy right there who's just listening to what they have to say. And so, I told you that Davos is small. And because it's small, it lacks sufficient infrastructure for, the roughly 3,000 people who will be there. There's not enough coffee shops. There's not enough restaurants. There's not enough hotels. So the result is that, for instance, one of the coffee shops where I've been for the last couple of years, there's 3, maybe 4 tables. That's it. 3, maybe 4 tables. And when these major sessions end, people spill out looking for something to eat or where they can get a cup of coffee. So the result is I'm sitting there, just imagine the way I'm sitting here right now, and I'm sitting at one of these tables. Again, 3 or 4 tables max. So let's say a total of 12 chairs. And 50, 75 people pour into this coffee shop, and they're all looking for a place to sit. And you know what I do? I don't move. I'm not doing the polite thing of saying, yeah, come on over here. You can have my table. 100% no. I'm sitting there waiting, and there are 2 or 3 chairs around the table. And inevitably, just as I was describing with this woman who's a translator for the president of South Korea, someone will come along and say, excuse me, is this seat taken? I'll say, why? No, it's not taken. Have a seat. Join me. And then what follows are interesting conversations with movers and shakers. Now, I mentioned that the 2,700 people who are attending, or maybe I think this year it's about 2,500 who are attending, those people tend to be idealistic. The group of people among them that I failed to mention are vendors who are there to sell things to government. They're there to sell, let's say, artificial intelligence to government, or they're there to sell them consultation or something to that effect. So I meet a lot of consultants, and these might be consultants on population control, on artificial intelligence, on immigration, on all the kinds of things that we're seeing globalists push throughout the world, through especially the Western world. And those conversations are startling. Ladies and gentlemen, a piece of advice I would really want to give you that's a piece of advice for life is try to engage with people who don't agree with you. Go and join a lefty book club. Go and join the Sierra Club. Go and join some organization that is notoriously left-leaning. And don't go in there with the plan of being, this Molotov cocktail tossing type. Go in there quietly. Listen to them. Ask questions. Don't reveal immediately where you stand on the issues. And if you don't, you're going to get more interesting conversations. So for instance, I don't immediately come out and in fact, I don't come out at all. I don't indicate where I stand on anything. I just ask questions. And because they assume I'm a WEFer, they talk very openly. If I were to come out as the conservative that I am, the evangelical Christian that I am, that I think their agenda is satanic, I wouldn't have any kind of meaningful conversation with these people. I might even be removed, you see. So what I do is I just move quietly among them, for the most part, fairly unnoticed. And there are little subtle things that you could do. This might seem silly to you, but it's the little things that matter. Just little bitty things that matter. So here's my backpack. For instance, a military grade backpack by Nima. For those of you who are interested, Switzerland, you don't really need it. Africa, you do. South America, Darien Gap, you want something that is virtually indestructible, and this is. But, this is a way, I carry it normally. I've got here this American flag on it. But these are interchangeable. These pop off. And when I go to the World Economic Forum, that's the patch that I put on there. People do notice these things. There's no WEF patches. There's no World Economic Forum patches. But that's a United Nations patch. The United Nations is the executive arm of the globalist agenda. I mean, the United Nations is driving a major part at an executive level of the globalist agenda. So I pop into a coffee shop and I'm sitting there with, I'm a little OCD about things like this. This needs to be symmetrical. There we go. So I pop into a coffee shop. I'm sitting there with my bag. Somebody sees that. They think I'm one of them. They think I'm one of them. And just by way of an indicator, damn it, I also have this. I have a variety of these. And you may say, why in the world would you have the Canadian flag? Well, again, this is just by way of a little indicator of the nature of my life. When I'm going through, let's say, the Grand Bazaar in Cairo, as I will be soon, I don't immediately want people thinking I'm an American. Being an American in some parts of the world is a great advantage to you because Americans are, generally speaking, very popular around the world. It's true. Even in a place like, let's say, Vietnam or Russia. I don't know about right now in Russia, but I've been to Russia several times, and Russia's generally like Americans. Vietnam, I was in Vietnam not terribly long ago. They like Americans. You think they'd hate us? They don't. In the Middle East, you become a target for terrorists. And I can't pretend that I am, I can't pretend that I'm South African. I wouldn't get away with that if questioned. I can't pretend that I am French. I wouldn't get away with that. But I could pretend easily that I'm a Canadian. My mother is a Canadian. Been in Canada many times. My grandparents, I grew up there. But the point being is that Canadians aren't, as a rule, really a target. They're just kind of your basic boogerhead Westerner. Nobody cares about the Canadians. I don't want to go. I don't want to be walking around Cairo. I want to be walking around Abuja. I don't want to be walking around some godforsaken part of Africa with my American flag stuff on. Don't want that. And so anyone who might assume I'm American, they see that Canadian flag, who cares? Doesn't mean I can't become a target. It means I'm a less desirable target. So the little things do matter. I don't mean this is going to get you into anything. All I'm simply trying to say is you need the accoutrements to go with whatever it is that you're doing that makes it a little bit more convincing. I show up at Davos and I'm trying to pretend to be a WEFer and I got an American flag. I mean, it's just better to go with nothing than to go with, with something like that. So again, these are just little subtle things, and there's many more little tricks that I could tell you that are very real that do help. But the most important, if you want to call it a trick, I don't know, maybe it's not a trick, maybe it's just a product of personality, but the most important thing you can do is to communicate that you belong there, that you belong there. You need to carry yourself with self-confidence. You need to project self-confidence. You need to project that you belong there, that you are one of them. And the result is that people assume that you are. And because they're all mostly interested in themselves, they, as a rule, just don't simply ask very many questions. Now, some people have asked me, someone asked, do you think they'll recognize you this year? Maybe, but I doubt it. And it's because they're so arrogant, they do not listen or watch any other opinions. They don't care. They're not listening to Tucker Carlson. They're not listening to Joe Rogan. They're not listening to Megyn Kelly. They don't care. They are people who, I could go on the most popular conservative podcast before the WEF saying everything that I'm saying to you right now and still go to the WEF and they probably still wouldn't recognize me. It's because they don't watch that stuff. They aren't interested. They don't care. They're interested chiefly in themselves. Now, what is it like there? I've been asked that many times, and I was doing an interview with Metaxas the other day, Eric Metaxas, who asked me that. He said, what's it like there? I don't know if this was on camera or off. And my usual answer to that question is that it feels spiritually dead. But I've realized that actually isn't quite accurate. It doesn't feel spiritually dead. It feels like you're in the presence of evil. So it feels like it's actually quite spiritually alive, but alive with the wrong spirits. And sometimes that feels incongruous with the circumstances, meaning you're in a beautiful place. The Swiss Alps, if you haven't seen the Swiss Alps, I don't care what time of year you're there, they're breathtakingly beautiful. You're in a moneyed little ski town, nice, quaint restaurants and hotels and coffee shops and the like. It's rich people who are there who are going snow skiing. And some of that stuff is still all going on during the WEF. A lot of people who are there, they're not there for the WEF. They're there to go snow skiing. So you got all that going on. And so it's not like you're seeing homeless people. It's not like you're seeing degradation. It's not like you're seeing a lot of crime or human trafficking or things like this that are going on. What you're seeing is all at a very, very high economic level, very expensive. And you're also dealing with people who I dare say haven't actually killed anyone. Rather, you're dealing with people whose ideas are sinister. And again, I'm talking about not really the people at the bottom level, but at the top. You're dealing with people whose ideas downstream are killing people. They are causing human degradation. They are causing crime. They are causing grief. And these people upstream, they don't care, either because they don't know or just because they don't want to know. They're not rubbing elbows with ordinary people. And see, what we're doing on a show like Ideas Have Consequences, and I'm moving at both ends. I'm showing you what's happening upstream. I'm with the champagne glass clinking elites in Davos, but I'm going to go from there and show you what's happening because of their ideas or ideas that they tolerate to Christians in a place like Egypt. I'm showing you both ends. And by way of example of this, last year, when I was sitting and listening to, in a very small room, there's maybe 30 people in there, and I'm sitting and listening to former British Prime Minister Theresa May talking about what they're doing to address human trafficking in Ukraine. And she's talking about these refugees, war refugees, that are pouring out of Ukraine into Poland, where she goes on to suggest that there are people waiting from them in Poland in order to traffic them. And I went up and I talked to her and I said, I may be the only person in this room. I was just in Poland. I was just there talking to these war refugees. I was there talking to these Ukrainians. And I've been in Ukraine probably 10 times. I've written a book about human trafficking in Ukraine. Have you been there, Miss May? And what comes out of that is that she's up there pontificating about things that she doesn't have any firsthand knowledge or experience of. And the people who are in the audience are listening and drinking it all in. They're all wearing their little, Ukrainian flags and shirts and all this kind of stuff. And none of them know what the hell they're talking about. That's what we're doing for you on a show like Ideas Have Consequences. We're listening to what people like Theresa May and Klaus Schwab and Bill Gates and all of these people who are puffed up with their own self-importance are saying, and the policies that they're advocating. And then I'm taking you downstream and showing you how those play out in the lives of real people. That's what we're doing. And that's what I'll endeavor to do again this year. So it really doesn't matter to me if I go and they say, oh, you can't get in. We're not going to let you in. Okay, fine. I'll go sit in the hotel lobby. I'll go sit in a coffee shop. These people got to eat. They're going to have something to drink. And they're going to talk to me because they do think that I am one of them. So that should be very interesting. I say that I'm looking forward to it. That actually isn't true. My wife will tell you that I actually dread going to the World Economic Forum. And it's precisely because it feels spiritually dead. And if you've ever been in a real wrong, correct myself, not spiritually dead, spiritually alive with the wrong spirits. If you've ever been in those sort of environments, and my work takes me into a lot of them, it engenders loneliness. You feel very, very lonely in those environments. And so I find myself in those circumstances often feeling almost kind of a crushing, kind of loneliness because it feels spiritually dark. So I'm always kind of glad when the World Economic Forum is over and I'm like, can't wait to get out of here. And then I go to someplace in Southern Europe where it's the climate is better and it's warmer and the people are friendlier and where I actually have friends. That feels kind of like you're taking a deep breath, you're exhaling. You're just like, I'm so glad that's over. So no, I'm not looking forward to the World Economic Forum, but I am looking forward to being able to inform you. And a final thought, the World Economic Forum, it's the practical working out, as I have said in previous podcasts and in just the previous podcast, it's kind of the working out of a godless agenda. These are people who just sort of assume that the biblical God is irrelevant and doesn't exist. And the result is that because man will worship something, what you find at the WEF, among the WEFers, is a neo-paganism. It's like they're have created a new religion that has at this point only a few tenets and it has no formal structure yet. But it's neo-pagan. It's a revival of ancient paganism and earth worship. They don't like human beings. It's about saving the planet. It's about earth worship. And for some of them, it's just simply about power. But imagine how arrogant you got to be to think that it's your job to save the planet. To think that you've been appointed by no one other than yourself to determine how everyone else on the planet lives. I hate what these people represent. I hate the WEF. I want it destroyed. And until then, I'll continue to expose it to the best of my ability. And we need you to join the posse. We hope you will. You can go to join.larrytaunton, that's Taunton, join.larrytaunton.com. We need you to join the posse, to support this podcast, to support my efforts, to support what we're doing here. And then I need you to share the podcast. We're being absolutely on this particular platform, the platform that I'm talking about, but I don't want to say it. This particular platform is choking us. You will notice that previous episodes, the early months of this podcast, we're getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 700,000 views per episode. And then they absolutely started choking us because they don't want people watching it. And they're not sending out notifications to subscribers, and they make it difficult to load, and they choke it with ads, and they do all those kinds of things in order to prevent people from watching. The way that we get around that, ladies and gentlemen, is by you sharing it. We need you to share this show with other people. We need the posse to grow the posse. We need to grow the messaging here. And again, it's not about me. It's about this calling. It's about this work. It's about what we do. I feel like what I do here matters. Hopefully I'm not flattering myself in saying that, but I really believe that what we're doing here matters because we're trying to break down for you what's actually happening in the world so you can navigate it and navigate it through something of a biblical lens so that you have a fixed point, which is a capital F and a capital P, and understanding that it's our God who defines what truth is and therefore defines what right and wrong is. And real right and wrong, real truth is universal. It is for all men, for all time. Jesus said in John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I love that. It's the most politically incorrect statement in all of Scripture because in that one statement, he discounted all other means of life, all other ways, and all other claims of truth. He said, I am that. And if you try to create your own religion or interpret me in your way, Jordan Peterson and Russell Brand. You see Russell Brand just this past week? He said we need new ways of interpreting Scripture because the world is changing. Russell, no, you're wrong. God's word is eternal. It does not change. He does not change. He is immutable. We are the ones who have to adjust to him, not him to us. He simply said, I am. It's been another episode of Ideas Have Consequences with me, Larry Alex Taunton. And by the way, when you get this, by the time you see this, I will still be at the WEF. So say a prayer for me, help push us forward, put some wind in our sails. We appreciate that. Take care.